moths to a light, or like a steel nailed to magnets, and the smugness was oozing out of them. I'm talking about the meeting of Smiley's people. Oh, what a lark. The peasantry in the form of the media scrum were firmly in their place, on the outside looking in. The media were reduced to fawning onlookers with their nose pressed against the window, you all saw it, gazing in awe as the great ones met. Who did Key and Banks really think they were? Napoleon and Tsar Alexander meeting at Tilsit? You remember from the history books? I don't quite right. If I inferred that you were there, I apologise. If you sat down in a cafe or restaurant and there was a black pouch on the table, what would you do? Of course, you would take it to the counter. That is what decent people do. You would ask, whose property is this? But Key and Banks did not do that simple act for one reason. They were enchanted. They were enchanted with each other. And a bit of political theatre they had contrived. Contrived with a capital C. Now the New Zealand public can see what a pair Key and Banks really are. Self-important, manipulative, insulting, and dismissive of a large number of New Zealanders. The ancient Greeks had a word for that. They had a word for what was present when Key and Banks met. It's called hubris. What we would call, in our language, arrogance. And hubris, as the Greeks understood, is a fatal flaw that leads to disaster and ruin. The real significance of the Teapotgate, or the Tea Party, fiasco is that it shines a long overdue light on John Key's judgment, on character, on trust, on credibility, on how he sorts out political problems. It shines a long overdue light on what a John Key political deal looks like for Don Brash. The Tea Party conversation covered what Banks thinks of Brash and how Key confirmed that view. Mr. Banks describes his leader, Mr. Brash, as, and I quote him, a strange fellow. Now that's pretty insightful, isn't it? And Mr. Key confirms that view with an, oh yes, we've been down that road before. End of quotes. Then, of course, they were at the meeting discussing, it was only 8 minutes. This is a meeting that someone with the electrifying mind that the media tells me is brilliant at analysis, got a rapier-like wit, iron cage memory. 8 minutes? I mean, what can you discuss in 8 minutes? But he forgets and says it's bland. But they were discussing the restructuring and rebuilding for the ACT Party, and it is clear that Mr. Key is advising, no, he's telling Mr. Banks of the ACT Party who their new leaders should be. If you're an ACT Party voter, tell me, why don't you just stop the nonsense and go and vote for the other party that's got the blue jacket? Because here is the leader of the National Party telling Mr. Banks on whose coattails they hope to get back into Parliament, who the new leader of the ACT Party should be, and that person is, according to Mr. Key, Miss Isaac. That caught you unaware, didn't it? Not Mr. Banks, not the rest. You got the National Party telling the ACT Party who the leader should be. Oh, and of course he went on, Mr. Key, during that meeting, to describe the people of this country who went to war. Many went through a Great Depression. For many, the Depression didn't finish as early as you say. In many parts of this country, the Depression was still there in the 50s. They worked hard, long hours, and built this country, gave it every modern facility, universities, hospitals, schools, gave it every modern facility of a country the size of the UK, but they did it with the population of Manchester. That's the people he's talking about. These people who he describes as my supporters, and says, and I quote him, as constituents are dying. Not voters, not people, as constituents are dying, is a description John Key uses to hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders who happen to be older. And then equally alarming is his belief of the percentage of the vote that National will get on election day, which would enable him to govern alone. And I remember what happened when people were allowed to govern alone. It led to MMP. Between them, Labour 84-90 sold $9 billion of assets at fire sale prices in a binge of ideological stupidity, and National went down the same road, and between them they sold $16 billion before MMP came in 1996. And Mr. Key wants to govern alone, and I'm here to say you need a get out of jail card. Because if you let them govern alone, you know what the prospects will be. And New Zealand First is a party with a long record of standing up for the New Zealand people, has focused on the people who create the real wealth, has never been popular with the speculators downtown, as you well know. In fact, we've been demonised. But make it very clear, in this election, if they get home, you will never get relief for the economic condition that you most suffer from, and that is a lack of rewards for your efforts, because the monetary system is totally weighted against you. That's what's happening. And so on election day, I suggest that you go out and buy yourself some insurance. I'll even go further. If you think your grandmother might come from her grave and condemn you if you vote National, if you really don't care about your province, give them your first vote. But party vote New Zealand First for your second vote. Buy some insurance, and I guarantee you, we'll give you a fair go. I know the position from opposition can be very, very powerful. We wrote the foreshore and seabed legislation of 2004, having negotiated with the coastal tribes, and Ngai Tahu was one of them, and they went public and supported our solution, where you all owned the foreshore and seabed. It was